Okay, William James, Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche was a slightly older man, but they lived fundamentally at the same time. Um, born born in around 1850 and die around 1910. Uh, Maybe James was older. I can't keep it straight. The important part is this: they live at basically the same time in the world, and we're seeing a lot of the same things. And as a result, have similar ideas. But these ideas, despite the fact that both men were well informed, both men had dealt with uh, Eastern philosophy to some level. Both men expressing ideas that are somewhat unlike uh, the material we've had in the textbook, and I wanted to offer you them for two reasons. One, they're my guys, they're who I read the most, who I've written about the most, who I've thought about the most, and if the other dudes could force me to talk about their guys, I can talk about my guys. And the other thing is, I think they'll sound a lot more friendly and a lot more familiar, especially after the last couple of readings there, where they get so technical, so over the top. You go read William James, and well, let's put it this way: William James's work was commonly posted in popular magazines like Collier's and Saturday Evening Post. I realize you don't know either of those magazines, but I grew up reading Saturday Evening Post as a kid. Uh, he wrote in a way that anybody could read and anybody could understand, providing you don't read his principles of psychology. Now, that was meant to be a textbook for Harvard University, and it does read like a textbook. But everything else, extremely readable, extremely easy to understand. Um, Nietzsche's harder to understand. I won't pretend he's not, but uh, the actual words, and I know you're saying I don't read German. Fine, go get any translation of Nietzsche. You will find him utterly readable, completely. I mean, that's why everybody knows all these quotes from Nietzsche, because he is so readily comprehensible and completely understandable when you look at it. I mean, it's dramatic and it's over the top in terms of content, but that's simply who Nietzsche was. So real quick, a little trot through, I think basically three ideas each. So let's talk first about William James. Okay. William James, American philosopher. Uh, he had a doctorate in medicine. He studied medicine. He actually uh, was a great founder of psychology and psychiatry in this country. Um, so, you know, but he nevertheless worked largely in philosophy. And the reason for that was, of course, at that point in time, we still weren't really dividing up the subjects. Everything was philosophy at one point. All of science was natural philosophy. As it grew off and each new subject spun off on its own, less and less was left behind for philosophy. But for William James, it was all philosophy. And so he wrote and acted that way. Um, okay, let's talk first about James and free will. Uh, James is someone who takes free will to be the case. Uh, his argument for that is one, that we feel like we have free will, so we have to act like we have free will. If we feel like we have free will and we act like we have free will, what possible restrictions are there? Well, he sees just one restriction. And now we're going to find out how James leads us to solving another problem and then a third problem. So we're looking at free will from the metaphysics section. We're going to look at the problem of evil from the religion section. And then we're going to take a look at the way to live, meaning of life, that kind of thing, from the philosophical anthropology section. So James says it's clear that the will means something. If you have to jump over a crevasse, a chasm in the mountains, that if you believe you can do it, you have a chance that you'll do it. If you don't believe you can do it, you may fall. Our belief in ourselves to achieve things makes a difference in whether or not we achieve them. That being true, he says, clearly our will counts for something in the world. It may not count for everything in the world, but it counts for something in the world. However, he sees that this creates a problem. He looks at the traditional omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, good God and says, well, wait a minute. If I am free, then God is not all powerful. And you'll remember, see, when we looked at the problem of evil, we saw that one of the problems that came up was how could God know everything and we remain free? So what James does is simply say, well, God is not all powerful. There are things God cannot do. These things God needs our help with. Now, that's obviously not orthodoxy, but it really is harmonious with all of the religious traditions that our authors have dragged us through, especially what we saw in Islam about our being the tool of the divine. But the difference is that for James, we are the tool of the divine because the divine is limited, not because it's all powerful and should have a full range of tools, as we saw in our reading from earlier in this section. Instead, he's saying, no, there are just so many limits to what God can do, and therefore we must be involved in the world. Now, this creates then our role in the world. How shall we be? He says the world where God is all powerful is the world of the optimists. The optimist is one who believes that everything in the end will come out for the right. The most famous example of that is Leibniz, who taught that this was the best of all possible worlds. And again, this simply followed logically. If God is omnipotent, God is omniscient, God wants us to have a good life, then he would create the best of all possible worlds. You say, well, I can imagine more possible worlds, worlds in which I don't have to take this stupid class. Leibniz would say, no, there is not a better world. If you could have had a better world, you would have had a better world. So this is as good as things can get. This is not a limitation on God's power. It's just a limitation on the things God has to work with. You can't make silk purse out of a sow's ear. Then there is the other end, and the other end has lots of espousals, but none of them really contemporary that I can relate them to you easily. I mean, the simple truth is that we have become an optimistic society for the most part, or else at least a fatalistic one. We don't seem to think that there's anything we can do about the ultimate outcome of things. But there was a time when people thought there's nothing we can do about the ultimate outcome of things, and it's bad. It's a bad world we live in. And ultimately everything will go to seed. You could describe perhaps the world of contemporary physics, which projects a heat death for the universe that says in the end it'll all come to nothing, and all the energy will expend itself and there will be just a blank nothingness. You could see that as pessimistic, I suppose. But James proposes another position. He calls it melioristic, as in ameliorate. You want to make something a little better, some better. You try to improve things. You try to ameliorate them. Ameliorate. So he says he's a meliorist. He preaches meliorism. It's not that it's all going to come out for the best, but it will only come out as good as we are willing to work toward the good, so that our will, our free will, means something. It's not empty. It makes the world better. So that we must be active in the world. We must work to promote good in the world. There you go. So there's William James.